welcome to the first Conscious Realms Static Zen session. In this video, we will be discussing why to meditate, what meditation is, and a common tool utilized in it, and 3 meditative principles to follow generally in your practice. Meditation is a very versatile and intuitive practice. Each individual will have to experiment with different stimuli, different approaches, and different variations of meditative techniques to find their perfect package and their perfect approach. Some common answers to the question of why meditate are to reach enlightenment, to find inner peace, to find Zen, to find or create a calm and serene inner environment for you to reside in. Meditation has plenty of neurochemical benefits, such as boosting serotonin levels, which stabilizes the mood, and activating the dopamine reward system for accomplishing a task. Ultimately, meditation acts as a tool set and compass, guiding you throughout your own conscious realm, your own inner domain or conscious space. Meditative practices help you create an internal domain, and they act as a compass to help you guide yourself through it. I'd like to address why I started my meditative journey. For me, meditation was a way to kind of get control, get a tangible grasp on the intrusive chaos which often occurs in the mind. The random thought patterns, repetitive ideas, spontaneous intrusive thoughts that constantly ramble on up there. I found meditation was a very useful tool in not only monitoring them, but also gaining the power to alter those ideas, alter those thoughts, and ultimately create a more positive perception and a more positive reality for myself. I found that throughout my life experience, throughout the various traumas that I had incurred throughout my childhood and my adolescent years, and just as I went about my life, I had picked up some very counterproductive thought patterns that led me more down a path of self-destruction than self-development and empowerment. I began to utilize meditation in order to create a safe space for myself within myself, in order to kind of be able to work through these ideas, work through these problem areas, and still feel like I am in control of these thoughts, in control of myself, and in control of my surroundings. With meditation, you truly can create that safe space. That is what I call the internal domain. When I say that in meditation you journey inwards, I mean you journey deeper and deeper into that internal domain, giving yourself more and more space, so to speak, to hold ideas, hold concepts, and kind of work, mold, and play around with them up here. The internal domain can be viewed almost as a whiteboard. And on this whiteboard, you are simply observing the thoughts that flow and using the meditative practice as a safe space to allow yourself retreat into when those thoughts get too volatile. However, that's not the only purpose that you could use meditation for. That is simply my application of it. Meditation can be used simply as a grounding mechanism, a practice of self-awareness, a practice of placing yourself in the present moment rather than in the thought spirals, anxious future worrying, or past pain triggering that your mind usually does. Instead of that time traveling, meditation helps ground you in the present moment. So if we continue the metaphor of the internal domain being a whiteboard on which you view and observe your ideas, the mind gap is the equivalent of the whiteboard eraser. Through mind gaps, you are able to break your stream of consciousness. You're not able to stop thinking or clear your mind. You do clear your mind, but you never actually, quote unquote, stop thinking. That's kind of impossible. What you do, however, with a mind gap is you create a state of immersion by occupying your mind entirely with the meditative practice. This can be done in 3 generalized avenues: occupation of the mind's eye, occupation of the mind's ear, and utilizing your body connection. The mind gap is a state of intense focus, intense immersion, and occupation of the mind with whatever stimuli you are choosing to use. Most meditative practices boil down to finding new and improved ways of creating these mind gaps for yourself, maintaining them and utilizing them as that whiteboard eraser, clearing your mind of the intrusive thoughts that may be occurring, kind of putting the mind's dialogue on pause for a little bit to zone in 100% on the stimuli you're focusing on. Let's get into the 3 different approaches that you can take to create a mind gap. Let's start with occupying the mind's eye. By this, I mean using your visual cortex, using your eyes, using your imagination. Meditative practices that capitalize on this form include any visual stimuli. For example, a flowing river, a fire, bright colors, just watching the clouds as they pass through the sky. Or you can visualize the stimuli. Imagine a glowing, radiant light entering your body as you breathe and leaving your body as you exhale. Play around with different types of visual stimuli. Find what colors, patterns, or textures seem to work best to focus and occupy your attention and focus your mind on that stimuli. Another avenue you can pursue is occupying the mind's ear. Here, you use auditory stimuli. For example, the birds chirping in the background. You can use light meditative music. You can narrate your inhales and exhales as you breathe. You are simply narrating so that the internal dialogue doesn't have a space to occupy. And you are occupying that space with your narration or with the external auditory stimuli that you choose to utilize. Now, finally, the third avenue is physical sensation or body connection. What I mean by this is pay attention to your body. Notice which parts have tension, which parts have more energy. Use your physical senses to, again, occupy your mind, break that stream of consciousness through hyper-focus on the stimuli. Several good techniques to utilize here are breathwork, stretching, and yoga, or utilizing hand signs. Your hands are the most sensitive area of your body, and therefore you have the most capacity for physical sensation here. I prefer to put my palms together or my fingertips together and focus intently on the physical sensation of the fingertips touching. This again occupies your mind and creates a mind gap. A really good analogy that I like to use for the creation of mind gaps is as follows. If I told you, do not think about a purple gorilla, where does your mind immediately go? It starts thinking about a purple gorilla. The idea of the purple gorilla occupies your mind. It fills it entirely. So all you can think about and imagine is a purple gorilla. Now, expand that concept to meditation. Your thoughts are a stream. Your thoughts are a stream and they flow. With a mind gap, you break that flow by focusing in on a specific stimuli until your mind is entirely occupied with that stimuli and intrusive thoughts no longer occur. Let's take a quick break now to put these 3 meditative avenues into practice. Again, try your best to occupy your mind. The mind gap is just a single tool in the wide arsenal of meditative techniques, but it is a very effective one. As I mentioned earlier, it is your eraser. When you are meditating, if thoughts occur, if intrusive thoughts enter your meditative space, use the mind gap to erase them, to refresh, to restart. This mind gap state refreshes your stream of consciousness. It starts it at a blank. It clears your mind and creates that sense of zen. It's very common for your mind gaps to be very short at first, 3 to 5 seconds at most, and that is okay. Your mind has been talking since its inception. It's very difficult to ask it to simply be quiet. However, with consistency and practice, your ability to create mind gaps, maintain them, and utilize them for mindfulness practices will improve. Now that we have discussed mind gaps and taken some time to try different stimuli for creating them, let's move on to some more generalized ideas and principles of meditation. First, let's discuss the principle of disidentification. Disidentification is simply the concept that you are not your thoughts. You have a brain, you have a mind, which creates marvelous ideas, marvelous concepts, and a universe, an infinite universe of potential. However, you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts do not fundamentally define your being and your existence. Through attachment and identification with thought, you are much more than your mind. You are a being, you are a body, and you are a spirit. As such, you can encounter the fallacy of composition, assuming that your mind simply is your being, and that your thoughts are all that there is. By disidentifying from your thoughts, you free yourself from that attachment. The next generalizable principle is immersion. Immersion goes hand in hand with the mind occupation we discussed earlier. With any meditative practice, you are using a specific set of stimuli to immerse yourself in the practice as much as possible, to become in tune, to become one with the practice you are pursuing. Only through this immersion are you able to create and maintain that mind gap for a longer period of time and clear your mind, enter a Zen state, enter a flow state. It's a state of intense focus, intense immersion in the practice. So again, you are trying to immerse yourself as much as possible with the meditative practice. Take yourself out of here and bring yourself into the present moment, into the practice, and into the activity and stimuli that you are focusing on. Immerse yourself entirely. Become one with the activity that you are pursuing. And finally, there's the principle of observation or non-reaction. When meditating, intrusive thoughts will occur. That is just inevitable. As I said earlier, it's very difficult to just turn your mind off, unless if you end up in a coma, which I'm so sorry to hear about that if that happens. But when you're doing your meditation, and when a mind gap ends and thoughts occur, just observe them. Don't react to them. Don't get angry at yourself for allowing the mind gap to break. Don't get upset that the thoughts occur. This is a very natural part of meditation and a very natural part of thinking. You must accept these thoughts, welcome them, and refocus on the meditative practice, letting them go. However, make sure you pay attention, as you will begin to notice patterns and repetition throughout your meditative practice. You will notice some thoughts that seem to cycle, some thoughts that seem to trigger other thoughts, and some thoughts that seem to almost occur in a bundle of sorts. Once you catch on to these patterns, and once you observe these patterns long enough, you will be able to identify them entirely and then eventually work towards altering them. So to summarize, in this video, we discussed why people meditate, which is to gain a tool set and a compass towards traversing and manipulating their inner conscious realm, what meditation is, and the most fundamental tool being mind gaps, or the ability to occupy your mind with the meditative practice entirely, forming a break in your stream of consciousness. We discussed 3 avenues from which to create mind gaps, being occupying the mind's eye, occupying the mind's ear, and body connection or physical sensation. And we discussed 3 generalized principles of meditative practice, being disidentification, immersion, and observation. You want to start your meditative journey. Where do we begin? Let's start with 3 fundamental principles to get you going. Disidentification. You are not your thoughts. Your mind is not the totality of your being, and your thoughts are just a part of your experience. Therefore, you should not form identifying attachments with those thoughts. Rather, just accept them as a part of your being. Second is immersion. When meditating, you are attempting to create a break in your stream of consciousness through immersion. This immersion occurs through the occupation of your mind through various stimuli, whether it be auditory, visual, or physical. Finally, observation, or non-reaction. When meditating, it's almost impossible to stop intrusive thoughts entirely. So, you must observe them without reacting. Welcome those thoughts, accept them, and let them go by refocusing on your meditative practice. Disidentified conscious awareness of your thoughts, yourself, and your surroundings.